Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here. And for me, it's extremely hard to believe that so many people have bought in to this Faucian bargain in which we let one man pretty much dictate what we are supposed to be doing in this country in regards to coronavirus. And whenever a voice dares speak up and get past the mainstream media censors that are all around us, the spin doctors, I'm going to show you that in a moment, well, they're just completely ignored or then erased. We're going to show a couple of clips here. Over the last couple of days, Fauci's made some pretty big claims. He says he's worried about 100,000 cases a day. Now, they're not going to show you him get eviscerated by Representative Schrader about a week before. They're not going to show you that at all. And it shows how Fauci actually capitulates all the time once he's called out on things. Like he capitulates to Ron Paul just either today or the day before. Now, before we get into the story, where he says this is going to get very disturbing, etc., I want to remind everybody I'm fully demonetized on this platform. I may be hitting the road tonight. I'm saving it for a surprise. I'm really leaning towards New Hampshire, though. I'm going to put up a Media Month 13th later this evening, but for now, thumbs the video up, subscribe, share, and if you can, donate over to the GoFundMe. We're going to be playing plenty of clips here, all right? Could reach 100,000 a day. And I watched Cuomo again today. Praise Tony Fauci. Praise Tony Fauci, as now 16 states are banned. Are banned unless you want to come back in quarantine. And let me tell you something. Let me tell you a little story. All right, I was talking to my buddy today. He already lost his main job over this in New York City. All right? Now, he had a secondary one over the summer. He was in North Carolina visiting his children, okay, when that got put on the list. There was like a day or two overlap. He gets back. Today was supposed to be his first day, but somebody saw a post from his daughter's Instagram that he was there, so they told him he could either quarantine for 14 days or he had to take the swab test, the violent swab test, yes, and what? Wait until he comes back negative. That's the weird Orwellian place we are at, okay? So, Fauci also said this. Are you ready for this one, guys? Before we get to the 100,000 quote. Drinking inside bars is one of the most dangerous things you can do right now. Not rioting in the streets. Not creating a Chaz or Chop zone. Going to the bar. Socializing with people. A very Faucian bargain, indeed. So I want to start with this. I want to start with, bootlicking Elizabeth Warren, establishment Elizabeth Warren, all right, narrative promoting Elizabeth Warren, fear-mongering Elizabeth Warren, and Dr. Fauci.
Dr. Fauci, back in March, you also said, quote, looking at what we're seeing now, you expected there to be between 100,000 and 200,000 coronavirus deaths and millions of infections in the U.S. So let's flash forward to late June. Here we are at the end of June. We've already seen 126,000 deaths with infection rates rising rapidly. Dr. Fauci, based on what you're seeing now, how many COVID-19 deaths and infections should America expect before this is all over?
God, I mean, I don't even know how they tried to sell you grandma oatmeal as a viable candidate. But then again, she just spoke 10 times better than Joey B did. Did you check out my last video on Biden? If you haven't seen Biden, I mean, he's a shell of a shell of a shell of his former self at this point.
I can't make an accurate prediction, but it is going to be very disturbing. I will guarantee you that, because when you have an outbreak in one part of the country, even though in other parts of the country they're doing well, they are vulnerable. I made that point very clearly last week at a press conference. We can't just focus on those areas that are having the surge. It puts the entire country at risk. We are now having 40,000+ new cases a day. I would not be surprised if we go up to 100,000 a day if this does not turn around.
100,000 a day. Let me put that into perspective for you. So 100,000 a day means in 10 days, if we get into that number, we're talking about 1 million people in a third of a month. That would be 3 million people infected. Why aren't we talking about the hospitalization rates still at a plateau? Why aren't we talking about the death rates going down, that we're just doing more testing? See, that's exactly how it was framed by Cuomo in the beginning. Oh, don't worry, we're doing more tests. Of course, they're going to come up more positive. Now, again, Fauci's allowed to say things that are absolutely ridiculous until someone calls him out on it. Now, I want you to watch this. No one in the media picked up on it. Shocking. But Fauci gets owned right here. Wait till you hear these numbers.
To Mr. Schroeder from Oregon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank everybody here for all the hard work you're doing. But I'm concerned, very concerned, that the American people are laboring under some gross misapprehensions as a result of some of the information that's out there. Dr. Fauci, what's the average time to develop a vaccine?
And before Fauci turns his mic on because he's completely incompetent and he's a total clown, and every time he's actually called out on something, he has to, reverse his position. And he's allowed to do that, by the way, because the facts aren't the facts. Yeah, everyone looks ridiculous in their masks, and then they have a little thing over the microphone which would already have a small cover like this. That's where we're at.
Mike, please.
It depends on the vaccine and the situation in which you're doing it. If you're developing a vaccine in the middle of an outbreak,
I'm just asking, what's the average?
about 7 years.
All right. And what was the fastest we've ever done?
Well, let's just stop right there. First of all, the average on a vaccine that hits the public, whether you like it or not, whether you're for them or against them, 7 years. That's the average. Okay? Now, let's ask him again, what's the quickest we've ever produced one?
It's the quickest a vaccine's been developed to date.
Well, it's probably, I think the Zika vaccine, which we developed, was about 1.5 years, but it was never brought to full fruition because Zika kind of disappeared.
Look at his smirk.
And say there is a...
Look at his smirk. Is anyone else disturbed about how he knows he's being called out on his filthy, lying, spinning, predator class endorsing bullshit? He's literally smirking the entire time. The entire time. 1.5 years and it's for Zika and it kind of went away. Kind of just went away. How about that?
The vaccine, what's the probability that a vaccine comes to market, actually?
Oh, if it's successful, it's a high probability.
No, I'm just saying, all these vaccines we got out there being developed, what's the probability they're going to make market entry?
There are more failures than there are successes.
Listen, you notice how he said there's more failures than there are successes. You see the little smirk on his little smirking face? Do you see it? He's about to say it's about 6%, and then Fauci goes, yes. I want you to think about that. 6% of vaccines that take an average of 7 years to take market, make it to market. But we're supposed to wait on the magical vaccine to put everything back to the normal. And the people that believe in all that, well, they thought they were going to be walking around with masks for 2 weeks, and that was it. And here we are. And here we are. Ready? 6%.
About 6%.
Right.
What's the chance that even with a vaccine, this virus will be eradicated? And I'd look to flu for a little bit of an example, influenza. How effective is that vaccine?
The influenza vaccine is variable because the virus changes rapidly.
Much like this virus.
We don't know that yet.
Well, we are.
Now, before we even get to the changing and the fact that he's going to bring up it's already mutated, because that's important. He said it was variable. The best the CDC can say for 2019-2020 seasonal influenza A and B was 45% effective, maybe, overall. And that's a high number, less than half effective. And again, when you have 5 to 10% of the population actually getting it, that means it's effective to 2.5 to 5% of the population? What are we talking about here? And that little smirking son of a bitch gets to sit there. And he's saying it hasn't changed yet. But this guy's going to tell you right now, he's going to say it mutated. And Fauci is going to defy logic and say that doesn't mean the virus has changed. Okay? Are we ready?
You already know it's mutated, right?
Yeah, that doesn't make any difference.
Doesn't make any difference. Why? Why? Oh, don't tell me you're frozen.
All RNA viruses mutate. That doesn't mean they change.
All RNA viruses mutate. That doesn't mean they change. All right. Okay, so what does mutate mean exactly? Verb, change or cause to change in form or nature. Let me repeat that for you. Fauci just said that mutate doesn't mean it changes. Okay, mutate, once again, let me read it for you in case you can't look it up. Okay, change or cause to change in form or nature. Okay, we're going to go back to the Fauci for a second because, again, he has to bow down and agree with this guy, and that's important to see. But what is more important to see is that when he says things like, you shouldn't be wearing a face mask in March, factcheck.org, it's an outdated video. It's out of context. He was saying that the nurses won't get the masks. But now he wants a nationwide slave face, unless you're rioting. All right? Dr. Fauci says no more handshakes. Nobody liked them to begin with. I don't think we should ever shake hands again. Why are we listening to this man? As soon as he said that, he should have been removed from his position. In a world without handshakes, no. How about a world without Fauci and his masters that are pulling the strings in this whole predator class operation? Okay? So I want to get to it again because Fauci just lied to your face.
Well, if I was a mother or a hardworking American citizen, and and I'm trying to bank on my family's future, how long do I wait? We're very worried that many Americans are waiting until there is a vaccine, maybe a year and a half at best, out there, and that's going to be the panacea, and they're all going to be okay. No. I think that's a terrible miscalculation. I'm not blaming anybody here, but it's a terrible miscalculation on the part of many Americans. And I'm going to stay home, not go to work, not send my kid to school, and I'm going to hunker down, and I'm going to be okay. I'll just wait for that vaccine. I think we have to start talking in terms of vaccine as one of many tools in the toolbox so don't end up in particular problems. Dr. Redfield.
I agree with you completely.
I agree. Look at the smile weasel face. That's what I mean. He's just allowed to bow down and say, I agree with everything. I agree with you completely. In the tool in the toolbox, then why are you literally the mouthpiece for the lockdown, Fauci? This is just, it's over the top. So now we're going to go to Rand Paul today, and you're going to see a similar thing. Rand Paul, and by the way, that gentleman also goes further and exposes, Redfield and Fauci on the schools. But I'm going to let Rand Paul dig in deep because he did a great job of putting Fauci in his place.
I think government health experts during this pandemic need to show caution in their prognostications. It's important to realize that if society meekly submits to an expert and that expert is wrong, a great deal of harm may occur when we allow one man's policy or one group of small men and women to be foisted on an entire nation. Take, for example, government experts who continue to call for schools and daycare to stay closed, or that recommend restrictions that make it impossible for a school to function. For a time, there may not have been enough information about coronavirus in children, but now there is. There are examples from all across the United States and the world that show that young children rarely spread the virus. Let's start in Europe. 22 countries have reopened their schools and have seen no discernible increases in cases. These graphs behind me show no surge when schools open. The red line is where the schools opened. There is data from Austria, Belgium, Denmark, France, Germany, Netherlands. No spike when schools are opened. Contact tracing studies in China, Iceland, Britain, and the Netherlands failed to find a single case of child-to-adult infection. Here at home, child care for essential workers continued to be available in some states throughout the pandemic. Brown University researchers collected data on daycares that remained open during the pandemic. Over 25,000 kids in their study found that only 0.16% got COVID. And when you looked at the confirmed cases for staff, there was about 1% of more than 9,000 staff. The YMCA also has put forward statistics. 40,000 kids at 1,100 sites. There were no reports of coronavirus outbreaks or clusters. Dr. Joshua Sharfstein of Johns Hopkins writes, there is converging evidence that the coronavirus doesn't transmit among children like the flu, that it is a lower risk. Just yesterday, the American Academy of Pediatrics says we got to get kids back in school. We want them physically present in school. They even cite mounting evidence that children are less likely to contract the virus. Ultimately, this all comes down to the fatal conceit that central planners have enough knowledge somehow to tell a nation of 330 million people what they can and can't do. Perhaps our planners might think twice before they weigh in on every subject. Perhaps our government experts might hold their tongue before expressing the opinion whether we can play NFL football or Major League Baseball. Not in October. Perhaps our experts might think twice before telling the whole world that a COVID vaccine likely won't provide herd immunity. We don't know. Why weigh in with these opinions that we have no knowledge of? These are forecasts that may well be wrong. Perhaps our experts might consider the undue fear they are instilling in teachers who are now afraid to go back to work. No one knows the answers to these questions. We shouldn't presume that a group of experts somehow knows what's best for everyone. Hayek had it right. Only decentralized power and decision-making based on millions of individualized situations can arrive at what risks and behaviors each individual should choose. That's what America was founded on. Not a herd with a couple of people in Washington all telling us what to do and we like sheep blindly follow. This all begs the question, when are we going to tell the people the truth? That it's okay to take their kids back to school. Dr. Fauci, every day, virtually every day, we seem to hear from you things we can't do. But when you're asked, can we go back to school? I don't hear much certitude at all. I hear, well, maybe it depends. All of this body of evidence about schools around the world shows there's no surge. All of the evidence shows that it's rare. I mean, we've so politicized this and made it politically correct that the WHO releases that it's rare, and you have a scientist up there honestly giving her opinion. What happens to her? She's blackballed, and her report that she refers to is taken off the website. When you go to that scientist's speech and you try to click on the link, the WHO has now screened it from us because it said something that's not politically correct. That, guess what? It's rare for kids to transmit this.
Let me just stop. I didn't stop because the man was on fire. The man was on fire. Talked about sheep off a cliff. Talked about the censorship of unpopular, not politically correct opinions that are, well, facts. They're not opinions, they're facts, but we're going to present them as wrong even though we publish them, because it doesn't go along with the predator class plan. Now watch Fauci, because when he responds, again, he grovels like the sniveling little Faucian he is.
But I hear nothing of that coming from you. All I hear, Dr. Fauci, is we can't do this, we can't do that, we can't play baseball. Well, even that's not based on the science. I mean, flu season peaks in February. We don't know that COVID's going to be like the flu season. It might, but we don't know that. But we wouldn't ban school in October. You might close some schools when they get the flu. We need to not be so presumptuous that we know everything. But my question to you is, can't you give us a little bit more on schools that we can get back to school, that there's a great deal of evidence, and it's actually good evidence that kids aren't transmitting this. It's rare, and that kids are staying healthy, and that, yes, we can open our schools.
Mr. Chairman, do I have a little bit of time to?
Well, I give you a little. That was well over 5 minutes, but we'll.
Thank you.
Now again, look at that smirk, and he just got owned, right? He just got schooled. Rand Paul will be demonized in the media. He already was demonized yesterday, right? The headlines were, we shouldn't presume to know everything, and, you know, all sorts of bullshit. And meanwhile, Fauci will just sit up here and smirk and realize the media will do their job in this operation, and he'll just bow down to Rand Paul and agree, and no one will cover it.
Senator
Go ahead and
Paul.
please answer the question.
Yeah, so very quickly, Senator Paul, I agree with a lot of what you say about, you know, this idea about people having to put their opinions out without data. And sometimes you have to make extrapolations because you're in a position where you need to at least give some sort of recommendation. But if you were listening, and I think you were, to my opening statement and my response to one of the questions, I feel very strongly we need to do whatever we can to get the children back to school.
Oh, yeah.
So I think we are in lock agreement with that. The other thing that I'd like to clarify.
Let me stop that. Lock agreement. Do you think that Anthony Fauci is in lock agreement with Rand Paul, who just basically said, open up schools now? That, without any kind of restrictions or whatever. Then, you know, he's not talking about anything. Rand Paul is up there saying, let's reopen our schools. There's no evidence we should have closed them in the first place. There's no science behind it. And Fauci sits up there smirking Fauci and gives the Faucian answer. I think we're lockstep in that. Really?
Clarify very briefly is that when things get in the press of what I supposedly said, I didn't say. I never said we can't play a certain sport.
And when they said I said something, and then they quote me and they play videos, the facts aren't the facts. Listen, I didn't say it. I never said it. They say I said it. I never said it. And then Cuomo's the facts aren't the facts guy, except for these facts. 2020, folks, you're looking at it.
What happens is that people in the sport industry, they could either be people from Players Association, owners, people involved in the health of the players, ask me opinions regarding certain facts about the spread of the virus, what the dynamics are. I give it, and then it gets interpreted that I'm saying you can't play this sport or you can't play that sport. I agree with you. I am completely unqualified to tell you whether you can play a sport or not.
I agree with you. I am completely unqualified to tell you whether you can play a sport or not. As he smiles, is this not the most contradictory, double-speak Faucian thing you've ever seen in your life?
The only thing that I can do is, to the best of my ability, give you the facts and the evidence associated with I know about this outbreak. Thank you.
It's unbelievable.
Thank you. We just need
Paul.
more optimism. There
Thank you,
is
Senator
good
Paul.
news out
We'll
there.
now
We're
go
not
to Senator
getting it.
Casey.
We need more optimism. They couldn't get Rand Paul out of there quick enough. Guys, I mean, this is just the beginning. COVID-19 84 is as real as it gets. As real as it gets. So thumbs the video up, subscribe and share, join the Burmese Brigade, donate to the GoFundMe. Again, we're going to put out a month 13th later this evening. I got to get that going before I take off. We're packing it up. I'm thinking New Hampshire. I'm going to make some phone calls after this. But again, thumbs it up, subscribe, share. Check me out over here. Remember, I'm a documentary filmmaker. Loose Change, Final Cut, Fabled Enemies, Invisible Empire, A New World Order Defined, and Shade the Motion Picture are free right here, right now. Please share my stuff all over. When I hear people are sharing it, I'm loving you for it. I need you to do it. Check me out on Rockfin as well as Minds. I love you guys, and I'll see ya on the Fauci. Oh!